right.
Okay. Hey everybody, this is Dan Hot 10 coming to you from Colorado once again, and there's kind of a disturbing set of events that I kind of wanted to discuss in this video. The people of America now sit week in and week out, huddled around TVs, radios, internet service providers, and any other venue where information may trickle out. We the people seem lost and confused as to what is really going on around us on a daily basis. Mounting debt in the trillions of dollars, job loss and unemployment claims still sweeping across our nation at unparalleled breakneck speed, individual tax burdens mounting day by day, robbed blind by banks, money brokers, big pharma, big oil, the medical community, etc., etc., etc. And meanwhile, our government silently looks on in full naked Marxist approval. Husbands, wives, and children sexually groped and molested at airports, train stations, and bus depots just to go on vacation, all in the name of national security and protecting our citizens. What does all of this mean? Where are we now, and where do we go from here? To answer these things, and to get us on the same page, Light in the Darkness Productions decided to sit down and hash out this in a sovereign state of the Union style address. So I've invited the owner-operator of Light in the Darkness Productions, Eric Lovely, a 17-year constitutional and common law political veteran. Eric has studied at various places of interest, such as the Library of Congress, the Department of Justice, and the Department of Social Services, just to name a few. Eric also casts his vote at the Electoral College, while the rest of us go and play vote at our local precincts. I've invited Eric to join me here and with you at home in discussing these stressful and distressing times. So without further ado, let me introduce the man that I believe should be the next President of the United States of America. How's it going, Mr. Eric?
Oh, well, it's good to be here this evening.
I'm glad you could make it. So I guess you know, we've got a lot of things to cover, and I guess the best way to do this is for me just to ask you a few questions, and maybe you can answer them for us.
Well, I will try my best.
Alrighty then. Okay, so let's start with what I started with. Where are we the people now in all of this?
Well, you're actually at the end of a program. Well, basically what it would be like is you're seeing the dissolving of a closet dictatorship into an actual real live in your face dictatorship.
Okay, and what would be the difference between besides the obvious differences between a closet dictatorship and an in-your-face dictatorship?
Well, a closet dictatorship it'll give itself the air of law. It doesn't matter what country you're in or where you come from, whether you have a parliament or so on or so forth. They'll either give a prime minister special abilities, or a president will solely accumulate special abilities unto themselves which actually don't belong to them in those particular power structures. So depending on which society you're in across the world and which form of government you have really depends on how it manifests itself. But here in America, it's based around the idea that the president and the White House, the office of the president, and that's what people need to understand. It isn't the man the president. The office of the president continues to accumulate and assign more and more power to itself that it has no authority or right to whatsoever.
So basically what you're saying then is, in a closet dictatorship, they want a dictatorship. They want to have and you know, operate a dictatorship. They just don't want us to know it's one.
Right. Most of the time it happens when you look in some of the revolutionary countries and you look at the different bodies around the world, what you run into is they are, as our forefathers said, governments are inherently afraid of the people, whether the people are dumb and asleep or not. Because the idea is not to not to wake the sleeping giant until your dictatorship has fully manifested itself in the public eye. So they give you the illusion that they're following whatever your constitution or said document says, and slowly, from one period to another, from one election to another, the one office continues to expand while all of the other offices continue to shrink while you're still sitting there voting. I mean, nothing for you. You don't really see a change. You're voting and trying to do all the things that, you know, you think you're supposed to be doing. But it really doesn't work because you're voting and electing people who are willfully giving away power to another branch.
Right. Okay. Let's move on to the next question. What, in your opinion, are the vessels that have brought things to this point?
Well, that's a rather long list that spans out in so many directions. You could start with, basically you could start with banks and corporations. And when you start there, the banks, and we don't really mean mints or things that deal with that type of currency. We're talking about your central bank systems. All of them continue to perpetuate the atmosphere that allows the government to do what it does. As long as they continue to print and deflate your money, then there's always going to be poor people clamoring. There's always going to be more and more of these needy people that you just have to trudge out there and get to. So the banks are extracting wealth at the same time. So it's a brokered deal. The governments are progressing on a path, or the government is progressing on a path from, well, it went from a republic to a democracy. Now it's making its final step into some socialist Marxist idea, and the banks and the oil companies and all of these people who create the wealth extraction are actually on a two-party system with the government, and the government says we have to get to objective B, or to our objective, and if you allow us to get us there and you support us, we will allow your group of elites within the corporate world to bank billions and billions of dollars in profit. This is the basis of fascism, which is a version of Marxism. And this is, the American model is now being it's a marriage between communists and fascists together to achieve their both the Marxist objective that they both believe in. They do believe in different ways to get there, but they both believe in the same objective, which is a super powerful state managed by elites. That's truly the Marxist belief in what they believe in, is that then that's how they get there. Now, there are so many other tools that are involved as well. You know, the banks save the corporations through bailouts and so on and so forth, but then you have the actual office itself, the different offices. Congress is just, it's given up. Congress gave up probably really long before some of the trials that you've seen in the 80s and 90s. That was the people attempting to speak back, and that was your last set of handful of congressmen who were really attempting to be some kind of free country. I'm not saying they were attempting to be the republic. They were far removed from that. But they were still attempting, and now you've just seen where Congress has surrendered. They give the president anything he wants. And then, well, how does that manifest itself in an actual vehicle? Well, the president now has assembled to himself through executive orders, being another huge vessel. You know, thousands of executive orders being written. Some presidents are far more highlighted in those than others, and you would be surprised. And each and every presidential executive order is an act of treason. And it doesn't matter which president wrote it. Okay? None of the presidents have the ability to write an executive order in the fashion that they do. They have no ability to legislate. But the president has taken it upon himself to legislate. Congress has surrendered. They do not challenge him or court-martial him or take him to trial for treason. They don't do anything. They don't try to impeach him, but he writes his own legislation, which is completely against the Constitution. And then past that, through his executive orders, you also see that in this year there's a major capstone that went in 2011. The president, up until now, you have to understand that it is a slow progression from one point to another, that it has been intentional the whole entire time, and you can tell that by looking at a timeline of history and the steps that they have made. Well, the president assembled all of these agencies to do things that Congress does, and to do things that Congress isn't allowed to do, and that he isn't allowed to do. You have the right to keep and bear arms, and that shall not be infringed. Well, you have the ATF, and all of these other, ICE, and all these people involved with gun running, and this gun manufacturing, and all of these things that deal with guns. Well, they all have gun legislation. Congress has gun legislation. That's completely illegal. It's completely unconstitutional, no matter what anyone says. Okay, that's what the law says. And then you go on further to look at, when you break down the president, you look at the ATF, the president can just simply, he writes a presidential order, and then the ATF will arrest you, lock you up, and put you in prison. The judicial system does not challenge the president's executive order. No one challenges it. This is the reason why you know it's a closet dictatorship. You have these other branches of government, but no one is actually challenging the power threshold that the president or the White House is attempting to gather for itself. If you look at this year, the capstone that we talked about, you're looking at the executive order that went in this year, and you know, someone can provide the number somewhere. It's really not that hard, and I think we're going to provide you with a listing of them, to where Barack Obama removed all of the regulatory power over these agencies under the White House, removed it from Congress, and gave it to himself. So this is the capstone. You now have all of these agencies in full direct command control by this one individual, this president, with the ability to control arms, drugs through the FDA, you know, working through the different trade organizations that he's erected, all of these different instruments and all of these different agencies that he has underneath of him, he's taking upon the White House that they're the supreme ruler. And now you see, as you move in, you have the now new said Super Congress.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, perhaps, well, let's really, you know, as we look at the Super Congress and we look at all these things, people really need to understand the progression. The CIA, which is a non-government organization, a non-government organization that was put into effect, it's been given government authority and government power, and who does it report to? It reports to the President of the United States. Okay, all of these instruments and things that are out there, he has his own army. I mean, the CIA has infantry troops. They have access to bombers, planes, jet pilots. They have access to anything they want. Okay? Anything they want. Look at the Bay of Pigs in Cuba and what happened to Kennedy and the reasons why, you know, a lot of people say Kennedy was assassinated for many different reasons. Well, he was, for challenging the bankers and for really challenging the bankers' big guns on the map, which is their own private army called the CIA. And when they invaded on the Bay of Pigs, after President Kennedy said, "Don't do it, I will not support you," they invaded, they called for the support, Kennedy turned them down, and well, we know what happened after that. And most people may want to look into this, you know, if you really want to do research and you want to look at the timeline of how all of these things built up, and you're looking at the CIA, you should actually look at the 9 different assassination attempts on Kennedy. Okay?
9?
Yeah, the 9 different assassination attempts, for anything from biological weaponry in a form of a deadly skin fungus to LSD, and then you basically ended up at the end result being where they said it was the only attempt on his life, and it was the you know, the gunshots that rang out around the world, and you know how they hoop it up and hoopla. But I mean, that's the position where you're at, and when you're looking at these things and these agencies, they all pay for these really high-pollutant guys to come on TV and spout a bunch of $5 words that you don't really know. They wear a tie. They have things behind them on the wall that say they're somehow some intelligent human being, and they feed you the line of whatever bureaucratic instrument the president is using. Every single one of these agencies has its own PR guy and its own PR department, and they put out propaganda from their own paid spokesmen who are supposed to be specialists. And these individuals are there to convince you that what's going on is the right thing to do, when it's absolutely the furthest from the truth.
Well, that sounds like a familiar tune. So, even though you've already kind of answered this question, I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyways. Do you think that this country is traveling in an overall planned direction?
Yes, absolutely. It is a 100% contrived plan. As you see right now, there is no way to say it's not. As the Super Congress comes into effect, and anyone can read the Constitution, and this is the end-all be-all. There's no argument with what's going on, because the president has elected to create a Super Congress. Now, Congress has surrendered. Congress has given him what he wants. Well, Congress doesn't have authority to give him what he wants. The only people in the mix that can rearrange the way the government works is we the people. And not one single individual out here has ever seen a ballot vote or anything of that nature which would actually go through the amendment process. Okay, the first thing they would have to do is they would have to amend the Constitution, if it really was the original Constitution, mind you. They would have to amend the Constitution in a very laid out process in multiple steps, and you would be those multiple steps would be very public, and it also includes a vote by we the people. Congress doesn't get the final say-so. They have to come groveling to us. Well, none of that has happened. No one has stood up and said that this can't happen. Where are the judges? Where are the impeachment trials? Where are any impeachment talk about this particular subject? You know, none of these things are taking place. Therefore, they have to be complicit with the idea. Because if not, they would be speaking out. And silence is consent. This government likes to use that. So they're guilty by their own charge. And yes, you are going in a specific direction, and it's not going to stop. It doesn't. The creation of the Super Congress is proof enough to tell you that it doesn't matter what you vote or who you vote for. There is a direction, and you are going in it, and you aren't in the driver's seat. And that's as easily as I can tell people. And the idea of this situation being handled through voting in a presidential election, I mean, I wish Ron Paul the best, even though I think he is still a far cry from where we need to be. And I don't know if it would be capable to get a real presidential candidate onto the ballot if the people are motivated enough for that. But that is such a long distance, abstract, nearly impossible idea. I mean, it's not impossible if you really technically look at it on paper. But you know what? Communism works on paper too. So, this is the whole idea you're looking at, is that there is a possibility you could do something. But right now, as the way things sit, with the way things with the way Americans are, and the way they act, and the way their knowledge level and how they deal with things, they're still piddling with popular votes and these things. They're not seizing the Electoral College. They're not trying to find out why they don't have access directly to the Electoral College. So, because they're not doing any of these things, they can't physically muster enough political energy to stop it. So they need to shift. They need to really start shifting and putting their energies behind other people. They need to be looking towards their states, but in the ultimate contingency, they really should be preparing for a state and people clash. Now, whether or not I'll call it a civil war, whether or not I'll call it a rebellion or an uprising, but it will definitely be a state and we the people clash. There will be some portion of we the people that will clash with this state, because no amount of whining and voting is going to stop the police state from existing. It isn't going to happen. And people can argue that fact with me until they're blue in the face. You know, we can go on any television show you want. I'll debate anyone you want. The writing is on the wall. The fat lady is in the corner warming up her pipes. Now, so we have very few decisions. You will see if you do nothing, if the people do nothing in the future and they continue to vote and try to take action in that manner, you will see the complete liquidation of Congress. They will simply cease to exist. It may take a decade, but that these people don't care. They got you to this point where they've allowed you to have a Congress for 100 years, and now they've done away with it. They've moved to a super Congress.
Well, based on the Congress's track record this term, I don't know that they really did us any favors letting us have a Congress.
Well, I mean, that's just part of the gameplay for us. You know, that's part of the interactive game that they have erected for you to actually take part in. You know, most people don't know anything about local county delegates or seats, or if you look at, you know, me and another individual, North Powell, has communications about this. I mean, this is another way where you can take back your local convention seats and places, but nobody ever concerns themselves or even talks about it or even cares to put enough energy into it. You know what I mean? So it is difficult. A lot of these things are difficult if you could seize the Electoral College in your states. And it's just like the presidency. Okay, you only need the states that give you the correct amount of numbers to make a president. And once you've taken those Electoral College seats away from corporations and put them back into the hands of the people, that doesn't matter. Those states vote for the appropriate individual who is the most constitutionally minded, and no matter what anyone else can do short of the government declaring war on the people, they can't stop it. So there are different avenues that no one is really, no one even practices or no one even uses that is stuck in this corporate fiction known as the U.S. Constitution. They're still there. They linger. They are afterthoughts from the original Constitution that still linger, but you can utilize some of them. Mm-hmm. And you can utilize some of them to your favor, but no one does. So, you know, basically in this union you're going to see a complete decrease in monetary purchasing power. You're going to continue to see, well, I mean, how that's going to translate is you've seen it in the news, quantitative easing 2. That, you know, they may call it, you know, My Bed Bertha 3. It doesn't matter. It's going to be the government attempting to create liquidity by printing money out of thin air and purchasing debt to inflate. And most people don't realize is that no matter what Keynesian economics individual wants to try and open their mouth and speak to you, it's a simple formula. It really is. The common individual can see it. There are X amount of goods. Let's say I have 2 pounds of beef.
Okay.
There's a possibility of making 10 whole dollars in the economy. So you're going to get a calculated per how much currency, increments of currency there are, will give you a counterbalance value of what each pound of beef is worth. If you continue to increase the increments of money available in the whole pool, then everything on this side must increase in price. It cannot work any other way. And when they attempt to inject money and price fix, the market comes apart at the seams, and you get wild peaks and troughs. You go up 500 points, down 600 points, continue this ping pong charade back and forth, you know, and everybody's waiting for the next pundit to come out and run off at the gums, and the numbers go up and down. That's because there's the black box trading, there is subsidization, you know, there's price fixing, there's market fixing. There is no free market, as we say, in use in the world. However, the market destabilization and the economic destabilization is the free market. And what the free market is telling the world is, you simpletons have ignored me and attempted to make believe that I don't exist. Well, the free market principles, what most people don't understand, is just like Mother Nature. If you piss her off, she's going to send a hurricane through town, and she's going to show you who's boss. And that's what you see in the free market. Gold, commodities, everything is fluctuating and continuing to go up and up and up. And you look at gold. When I had people telling me when it was at $1,121. You know what I mean? Oh, it's the highest it's ever been in so long. The bubble's going to burst, and you know what I mean. And you're crazy, and don't do that. But as you continue to see, as they print, has that bubble ever bursted? No, it's the price continues to increase because they're continuing to print. There's no way to stop it. Unless you stop them printing, you can't stop that inflation. These are mathematical principles that Keynesian economics thumb their nose at, and these governments thumb their nose at because Marxists think they're smarter. The problem is they're wrong. And they don't want to face up to it. They live in this self-absorbed world where they hook you into this world either by your feelings. You got to save the poor people, you got to save the hungry, you got to do something for these jobless poor people, and they weigh on your emotions, so they hook you in there, or they hook you into big wars, or whatever it is you're fancy, and break the population down into little pieces and utilize this against you. And people have to understand that before welfare, let's just take welfare, there was about a 3% poverty line. And we were so concerned about those 3% that we had to create welfare. And now, we're at 44 million people on welfare. We're at we're in a double-digit percentage of the population that's on welfare because of the programs we implemented to stop poverty. So it just doesn't work. And after 100 years, of us running away from the forefathers and running away from the Constitution, you would think after 100 years of history, people would be able to see that writing on the wall. But they don't. They're so focused in their here and now. Me, I, what's going on right now. It's one of the major reasons why we haven't been able to fix things, because there's a lot of people who are only worried about themselves. I'm worried about my wealth and my this. Well, I get to keep my home because I get a check from the government, and I get to keep this, and I get to have that, and I get to do this because I'm poor and broke and I need the extra help, and no. So, basically what they've exchanged is they've inflated the poor and the downtrodden. They've inflated their numbers astronomically by their own actions, and they refuse to review that. They refuse to look at it, and people themselves refuse to just stand up and say no. It's kind of like the parent. If you've ever met them, people have met certain parents in life, okay, where their kid is a drug addict, but they will continue to give them money and continue to love them, attempting to do the right thing, hoping their kid will come around, hoping that their kid will do something differently. They fall for the same story every time. They fall for the sad act, and they continue to fundamentally aid and abet their addiction. Well, that's what the people are. The people are looking at it as, we're so in love with what we have, and we're so worried about ourselves, our own personal inner feelings of, I don't want to lose my son or daughter. As you look at that check in the same line, I don't want to lose that, so I'm just going to make it someone else's problem, and I'm going to continue to do the same insanity over and over and over, hoping it's going to just all of a sudden fix itself.
Well, isn't that really in reality what we've been doing for the last 200 years? With the way the voting system is set up and whatnot like that. It just seems like there's so much corruption around that it seems awfully similar to what you were just talking about.
Well, it really is, and the government's, this particular government for 200 years, what they're doing is so sinister. It's beyond just the footnote. You see, the individuals, these Marxists, because it doesn't matter whether they believe in green space aliens or whatever they believe in. At the root, they're Marxist because their goals are the same. All of their objectives end the same point. So everybody from the whack jobs to, secret societies to government agencies, spies, agents, bureaucrats, all of these individuals believe in a Marxist goal. Okay, so, but the problem is that this is the ultimate Marxist master plan. Because they don't just get America. They get the whole show. Because they convinced the world, through progression, to make the US dollar the reserve currency. Then, through progression, implemented their president to remove us from the gold standard. And at that point, it's a fiat currency for the world. So, as they crash that currency, they get everything. It's one ball of wax. They take the whole thing with them. Because every economy and every currency will be swallowed into that black hole. Because they're floating around, and imagine that the dollar is the sun of the entire known existence. Well, when that sun implodes and turns into a monstrous super black hole that's half the size of the universe, or more, well, all those little things that are riding on the waves are simply going to be sucked in and imploded into the black hole with it. There is no country on the face of the planet who really has the ability to see its way out of this and fix things. So America really is the key. America has once again become the great bastion on the hill, the beacon of light, the last gasp of mankind's freedom, because everything hinges on us. And we're sitting around watching the rest of the world fight this war for us. This fight that belongs to us. This fight that we allowed to have happen. This fight that we have allowed to plague every nation on the planet. Every single one. We have physically allowed that, so we need to take ownership of it and we need to deal with it. And the world really is watching us. The world really is counting on us. No matter how much the individuals of the world hate us, be it Muslims or any other group that you want to come up with, every economy, the petrodollar, everything is linked to the dollar. Your energies around the world are moving and shaking in dollars. Now, can some countries quickly attempt to start trading in other currencies and things of that nature? Yes. But that's going to cause massive upheavals in their economy. It's going to cause wars. It's, take the parts, and I make a biblical reference, but you want to take the parts of the Bible where they talk about wars and rumors of wars and things of that. Well, that's kind of the setting you'll look at, because there'll be trade deficits. There'll be people claiming that this country owes us this, and this country owes us that. And America will not be able to afford to expand military forces and contain all of these regions. It's impossible. It just can't be done. So you're looking at a worldwide global event based on what Americans do or don't do.
And this worldwide global event, are we perhaps suggesting that this could be that proverbial World War III?
Well, it may very well spiral into that, because it is the very real possibility. If you look at the nations and how the United States has messed with them, and how, like when Ron Paul talks about blowback, well, parts of the blowback that no one talks about is you have created these smaller militant states. You have created alliances that never existed before because of religion boundaries and things of that nature. But so now you have a thing where you have all of these sects of, say, Muslims, countries, that don't like each other, but are more than happy to sit around the fire, smoke cigarettes with each other, tell jokes, eat dinner, sleep together. Hundreds of years ago they wanted to kill each other, but they're more than happy to be allies now to kill the worldwide oppression. You see, people look at it as the American oppression, but it's a worldwide oppression that these people are trying to rebel against. And you can look at Gaddafi or any of the people involved, and there's a story behind all of them, real hard stories behind all of them, that basically show you that this blowback effect is you're uniting extremely radical factions together. So if the world does go into shambles, what prevents these radical factions who own large chunks of the energy resources in the world that we're presently using, that we really shouldn't be using, but that we're using now, what's to keep them from creating an energy superstate and choking the life out of any country in their region and using that to create a World War III event, because then the rest of the world, if it wants to survive, is going to have to band together against them. So, I mean, yes, you're completely correct. There's a different number of scenarios going into the future, but all of them lead into worldwide catastrophic events. Trade wars, real wars, you know what I mean? There's going to be genocide. There's going to be mass starvation. There's just going to be things that we caused by simply crushing the economic realities and attempting to go to war with the free market. And you can't win. The free market will always beat you.
Well, this sounds like this is something that's been going on for quite a long time, and it's rather complicated. Do you really honestly think that the American politician, your typical American politician, regardless of what level of politics he's on, is intelligent to plan and carry out this complicated of an idea, or do you suppose that they've gotten outside help?
It's definitely outside help. Most politicians are, well, there's no real nice to say it. Real nice way to say it. They're nothing more than that idiot gesture or the herald. Okay, in the olden days of the court, they're just paid a lot better. But basically, they're a herald. They're just there to collect money, to collect their corruption payoffs and whatnot, and to herald in what they're told to. They don't really think and operate themselves in that venue as a whole. Now, by far, there are specific key individuals. You know, you could go Nancy Pelosi, Obama. You can go down the list, Boehner, and all these other individuals who are they're centerpieces. They appear to be the ones who are given the ideas and who are given the speeches, and they're the front runners. And then you have others that just simply assemble behind them and vote. You know, because that's the way that they're supposed to vote. And no matter what goes on, no matter what the people say, no matter what the people think, the vote continues to go forward. You continue to take these progressions, no matter how much you scream at them to stop, they don't care.
Well, I think we can think of some pretty recent examples of that. You know, the TARP bailouts, the health care bill, the cap and trade, the carbon tax. These are all things that the American people have screamed at the top of their lungs, no. And yet, they continue. I don't think they've done the carbon tax yet, but they're just about there.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, the government isn't going to do the Congress, as you see it, isn't going to do it. You know, that's the easiest thing we found, because they don't want to take any more heat.
Right.
So he's doing it by executive order, and what's happened is the EPA right now is building a committee to write the new regulation that will implement the very same taxes that everyone said we're not going to pay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the EPA and the president says, you're going to pay them. He's just going to do it through regulation. And he's going to saddle it on you and saddle it on businesses. And in it, there's more subsidization. There's more money being poured into these idiot green power sources. And, you know, when it all boils down to, it boils down to an easy equation of energy put in and how much energy comes out. Now, how much energy does the people have to put into the situation to get the right amount of energy they need at their home out? Well, none of them meet that. Nuclear can't meet it and actually call itself, the way it is today, a green energy. If you look at the science and if you look at what's going on and how those plants are actually run. Solar energy, they continue to make these great advancements, right? And I think they're up to, I don't know, a net retrieval of 47% of the energy they put in, they actually get out. And it's not just the sun beating on it. People say, well, you know, put the sun panel up and you get all this extra energy. Yeah, but you're not calculating against how much energy it was in to build the entire infrastructure, to build the entire equipment and pay all the people and everything involved. That is capital. And you cannot show a bonus profit, which in this case would be usable energy, okay, when your efficiency rating is below 50%. But yet the government is insisting that this is the way of the future, and we all have to pay our dues and pay taxes to subsidize this green energy institution. When it just doesn't make common sense. It just doesn't work. It just that's the easiest way to put it. People can research. People can look where they want. You know, whether or not they're going to listen, who knows? But the way it is set now, I mean, there are certain things that should be happening. And, you know, well, do we have any more questions?
Yes, I do have one more here for you. As a historian of constitutional law, what do our founding fathers say to us through the original Constitution about actions like the creation of this said super Congress?
Well, that's pretty easy. I mean, it really is pretty cut and dry. Beings that let's see that there is no power within the Constitution that the people gave to the government to allow this to happen. Therefore, to do this action is unconstitutional. But it doesn't stop there. So first off, the action is now regarded as unconstitutional. Well, the congressman and the president, well, let's get technical. The ATF, the DEA, the sheriffs, every police officer, every policeman, every individual, okay, these individuals know they have an oath to the Constitution. They know the power isn't in the Constitution. So that makes them knowingly and willfully committing an unconstitutional act. Well, that's the standard definition for treason. And it is my humble opinion that I could try them all in a natural common law court under the Constitution, and I could most definitely convict 60% or better of them and then hang them from the neck until dead. That's the way it goes. People don't understand the reason why that penalty is in effect, and the reason why when they are hung, they should be hung in a town square, in broad daylight, in the middle of public. You know, people just don't grasp it. They don't understand where they are and how far they've gone from the roots, and the amount of fear that you must instill in your government. And since you have waited so long to instill that fear, it must be swift, it must be harsh, and it must be public. And that is what needs to happen. Now, most people believe that to be barbaric or anything, you know, they want to say lots of things about that mentality. Well, like myself, if I was the president, I would embrace that mentality. Because that would keep me on the straight and narrow. If I know that I do something that isn't constitutional, and I do it knowingly and willfully against the freedoms of the people and against liberty, then I should be hung, personally. And, you know, a president should have no fear with that looming over their head. There should be no Congress with a fear with that looming over their head. They should have no fear to carry out and conduct their actions and activities. You know, and the realization is if businessmen and whatnot, if they come in and they bribe you, or attempt to bribe you, well, you have a protection as the president. Because they're committing an act of treason. And you simply carry out the process. Because you don't have to be an official of the government to be guilty of treason. You simply have to knowingly and willfully carry out actions that damages someone else's overall constitutional rights, or their natural born rights, their inalienable rights. and you have to do it on a scale where you're actually attempting to not just harm them, the instant break of your freedom, but you're actually attempting to destroy their freedom. That, once you do that willingly, well, that's an act of treason. So if a businessman willingly attempts to bribe me to change the law to screw X amount of people and out of their rights and their wealth, that's an act of treason. And he goes to court, and he's hung just like the rest of them. You show them no quarter. This is the reason. Freedom is not easy. Freedom is something you must fight for, and the fight never ends, because someone will always come along who wants to take it away from you, claiming they know better than you.
You said earlier that we're going to have to retake that part. You said earlier that freedom was a struggle, and freedom is something that one must fight for and constantly be vigilant about. Well, it seems to me that there was another president in our past, another president of the United States of America, that shared the same ideals and the same sentiments about freedom that you do. And I wondered if you'd like to humor me and share some of his thoughts with our audience.
Well, I mean, there's actually quite a few, believe it or not. Some of the ones that stand out are Washington, Adams. These were guys that, I mean, they, even at times where some people disagree with my relative upon occasion, Adams was the individuals who towed the line. Washington, you had other people in there who were prince nobilities and things. Most people don't know about them. They're Moors and so forth, but that's a whole nother venue. But Thomas Jefferson was probably the absolute pioneer of freedom, and he wrestled with his own convictions, constantly weighing himself against his own ideas about freedom, and he constantly found himself lacking. And that ever pushed him forward and continued to think, well, it's a continual fight. And then once upon a time where he started embarking on over a decade-long venture overseas in the British common law courts, attempting to argue the cases for the colonies and things. He came back and he made a quote, his first quote, that was used in a speech. Well, he made a speech and he gave a quote. It led to another quote, but the first quote that he used is basically when he came back and he addressed the people. He said, "We've shown them that we can think like men. Now let's show them we can fight like men too." And which then lead him to tell his people in his own state at the time, his own country, where he always, if you read his writings, kept saying, "I want to go back to my country." But he was in New Hampshire. He wasn't out, because his country was a state. That was his country. But when he got back to his own country and he gave a speech, as he was talking about the woes and the problems and what was coming up, but he basically said that the people, he said, we the people should stand fast and understand that freedom cannot be granted or bestowed, that it must be torn from the hands of your oppressors so violently as to basically scare the crap out of their offspring for generations to come. You want to put the fear of death in a despot's offsprings. That's the whole idea. And so when you look at these quotes and you look at how he addressed slavery, and I don't agree with how the personal moral decision he made to protect his slaves by keeping them. Now, I'm not saying that I completely agree with that. He was stuck in a rock between a hard place, but if you really look at his writings and how he really tussled and he really fought with himself to continue on to freedom, and he talked about when everyone else around him, there were a lot of people around him that talked about blacks being less than a human being, and so on and so forth. And there's another quote, that Jefferson used that most people don't even think about, where he talks about, and my son, black as the coal driven from the mountain. So he's telling you he has a black, half black son. He says, driven from the mountain, I love more than winter and the seasons itself. And to me, he is a man like anyone else. Now, when you talk about how he really felt and what he really thought, people have this weird messed up image because of the propaganda, because of the school system and things, and they don't understand that a lot of these people they weren't revolutionary politicians. They were revolutionary thinkers. They were breaking ground that had never been broke before. People can say anything they want, but what was created in America when America physically took itself into independence, it created a whole new form of law, a whole idea of thinking, a whole mindset and a lifestyle that went along with it. And these guys were the free thinkers of what is it, as we're building this free world, what is it that really means freedom? And how do we continue to subject ourselves to our own theories and prove to ourselves that we're wrong, we haven't done enough? And that's what these writings that these gentlemen wrote about. And they wrote on a free thought idea that, well, some of them believed in God, some of them didn't. A lot of them talked about, well, if God created me, God created him, and all of these things that I have now come to possess being mine, then there is no way that this person and that person and that person. But they hadn't gotten there yet. They were breaking the ground of free thought and real freedom, because we live under kings and tyrants and dictates and despots and groups and organizations for thousands of years. Romans, the Arabs, whatever country you want to come up with throughout history, there's an empire, and there are no free people. The closest you came to it was the Greeks, and the Greeks were off into democracy, and that took a nosedive real fast. And that's why when they rewrote, they even cited democracy. They told you how horrible it was. They told you why they couldn't use it. And then they went to the true freestanding republic.
Well, this has been very informative. I hope you all have gotten out of this what I've gotten out of this. And I'd like to thank you for taking the time to spend the evening and spend some time with us, and giving us quite a bit of insight as to what's going on around us today, what this super Congress, the connotations that go along with that, what that means, and just really how far down that path that we really don't want to go, we've already traveled as a country, as a people, as a nation. I think that I'm going to have to go and chew on a lot of this for a while and ponder some of this for a while, so I think I'm going to say good night.
Yeah, and well, definitely appreciate being here, and I hope that's what people do. I hope they chew on it and they ponder it. We can do follow-ups, discussions. If you guys
do that.
If you guys got any opinions or anything, chunk it in the bucket below. Let us know what you think. We're not gonna turn anyone off. We hope that you don't freak out and do a lot of cursing or racial bashing or anything stupid like that, because the idea of this conversation and where it came from was out of the idea of putting aside those things.
Exactly.
That it is time that we have acted like children, immature little snot-nosed children in the playground, goofing off. He looked at me, she touched me, he put a booger on me, he's black, he's Hispanic, he's white, she's a lesbian. They're God, no God. We've played these child games against each other, and it's time that we just stop. Just stop and look around you. It doesn't matter. Look into your communities, your Hispanic communities, your black communities, your white communities. Is any of that crap that you're doing making any of it better? Then stop.
Exactly.
Just stop.
It makes the most sense, seems like the most reasonable thing to do, the easiest thing to do, because right now, with the country the way it is, and the direction that it is spiraling out of control in, it seems to me like all of those kind of arguments really pale in comparison and seem rather petty compared to the question of whether we're a free republic, or whether we're a democracy, or whether we're a socialist, Marxist governed people. Basically comes down to is, are we going to be free next year? Are we free now? Have we ever been free in your and my lifetimes? Those kind of questions seem to have a lot more sand in them and a lot more substance to them in the state that things are in right now, as to worry about what color shirt he wears, or what God he believes in, or what part of town that guy lives on, what side of the tracks he lives on. I mean, let's stop the nonsense and stop the petty crap and start getting on the same page and start looking at our freedom and looking at the realistic things that we're going to have to undertake to regain that freedom that our forefathers like Jefferson, Washington, Adams, Jackson provided for us. And it's been our duty to maintain it for them. They did the work in providing it for us, and we have not done our job in maintaining it very well. And I think that we need to get back to our roots.
So until next time.
You can reach me at DanoHawk10 on YouTube. And Eric, you want to?
Yeah, Ed Grot, EDGROT, on YouTube. Either place, you'll be able to catch this video and spread it around, share it with your friends, get people involved in the conversation. And oh, by the way, on either channel, I would say that if you have a video response, 2 minute, 3 minute, whatever you want to throw in a video response, feel free. Let's make this a real community conversation.
Absolutely. The more people that get involved with this subject and with this conversation thread, the better off we'll all be. So with that, I'm DanoHawk10 for Eric Lovely, and we're out.